Well, the last 2 weeks have been an extraordinary moment in the history of this war. On August 8th, US President Donald Trump announces his Alaska summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That following Wednesday, Mr. Trump says there will be, quote, very severe consequences for Russia if Mr. Putin doesn't agree to end the war in that meeting. Then the Alaska summit happens and no deal is made. But the US president still cites progress. And then after the Alaska summit, Mr. Trump pivots to wanting a lasting peace deal rather than a ceasefire. And then on Monday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders join Mr. Trump for talks at the White House. On Tuesday, the U.S. says plans are underway for a meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian presidents, and that U.S. ground troops won't go to Ukraine as part of a peace deal. Well, Moscow refuses to commit to a Putin-Zelensky summit, but has not ruled out further talks. Well, my next guest is the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and a former Trump National Security Advisor. John Bolton joins us now live from Washington. Good to have you with us.
Glad to be with you.
So President Trump rolled out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin at the Alaska summit. This is for a man who's wanted for war crimes, a man who's shunned by international leaders for invading a neighboring country. And I just want to bring up some vision from that summit. As Mr. Putin approached Donald Trump, you could see the president, the US president, clapping. You've been a vocal critic of concessions to autocrats. Do you believe this approach emboldens Putin?
Well, absolutely. And I think he basically achieved what he wanted to achieve in Alaska, which is to bring back the Donald-Vladimir relationship so that Trump thinks he's his friend. He clearly must have put a lot of pressure on Trump in terms of territorial concessions. Those have not been discussed much, it looks like, in the meetings in Washington. Chancellor Merz of Germany said afterward that territorial swaps didn't come up. They spent their time talking about security guarantees. I don't think there's any evidence that the Russians have backed away from any of their positions. And I think they feel emboldened when they heard on Sunday Secretary of State Marco Rubio say there were going to be no sanctions, no further sanctions applied on Russia while the prospect of talks continued, because that would end the prospect of talks. It's a good argument. It's pressure that brought Russia to the table, and to say there's not going to be any more pressure absent a total breakdown of the discussions is the free hand that Russia wants.
Ambassador Trump is now pushing for a Putin-Zelensky summit. Even if that happens, what's the risk of a bilateral meeting as opposed to a trilateral with Trump at the table?
Well, I don't think anything will happen at a bilateral meeting. I think from the Russian side, Putin would give his version of the last 1,000 years of Russia-Ukraine history. I suspect Zelensky can probably respond to that word for word. Neither one will make any concession at that meeting. I think it could end up just to be a waste of time and really a dance to show who is the one who is obstructing peace. And they're both pretty good at pointing the finger at the other person. I think Putin is not interested in speaking with Zelensky absent a lot of preparation. And indeed, I think it's probably true that since no progress is going to be made, even if they met tomorrow, I'm not sure why we're still pushing on it. If there's a serious desire to have a peace negotiation, a real one is going to require preparation. It's not the style of Donald Trump. He likes to meet first and let the munchkins work out the details later. But that's not something I think either Zelensky can risk or that Putin wants to do.
We certainly have heard from the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, on state media in Russia downplaying the prospects of a bilateral meeting. You've known this man for a long time, and of course Lavrov was someone that has been referring to Zelensky as that man or that character, not even calling him by name. Given your history with Sergei Lavrov, how much influence does he have in the next steps here?
Well, I think he's primarily an implementer, but he's been around for a long time. I think he completely shares Putin's view of how this ought to work out. When I first met Lavrov. It was during the George H.W. Bush administration. I went to Moscow and they gave me briefing papers on him. This is before the collapse of the Soviet Union. But it said, we assess that Lavrov is not a communist. We assess he is a czarist. And it was true then and it's true today.
And just quickly, we've heard Trump float the conditions for Ukraine dropping NATO membership, giving up Crimea. From your perspective, is that diplomacy or appeasement?
No, I think it's appeasement. I think you're just seeing the watermelon sliced in many ways. No U.S. troops on the ground, no NATO involvement in the security guarantees. Putin doesn't have to win every victory simultaneously. If he can just keep slicing away, Ukraine is left in a more and more difficult position, and that's all to Russia's advantage here.
And what would be the future of U.S. credibility if Ukraine is forced to give up territory?
Well, I think it would be a big mistake, and I think not just in the case of Ukraine, but others on Russia's periphery, threatened by Putin's evident objective of recreating the Russian Empire. And I think they're watching it all very closely in Beijing, and their targets in Taiwan, the South China Sea, Southeast Asia ought to be worried about it too.
Yeah, exactly. Former Ambassador John Bolton, always great to get your perspective. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, still to come tonight, a new U.S. travel ban is making it harder for American allies to escape the Taliban in Afghanistan. We'll have a look at their struggle coming up. Plus, California's Democratic governor has vowed to fight fire with fire in the battle that could impact the balance of power on Capitol Hill. The new obstacle he's facing in his push to redraw his state's electoral map for the 2026 U.S. election. That's next.